When people go to strange lands, they collect everything they can. So Darwin, of course, collected as much as he could on the shorelines. These are marine organisms and shells. We have birds. Famously, Darwin collected finches and mockingbirds. Not here in this case, because this is a case of Australian birds. Look at the diversification of these little fellows. And the parrots. If Darwin had encountered Australian parrots, he would have been thrilled to bits. He spent just under 3 weeks here, but most of that was actually in Tasmania. So it was a very limited trip. Had he gone inland, I think he would have just found it astonishing. He went from Sydney over the Blue Mountains on an expedition, which in those days was very difficult to negotiate those hills on horseback, and saw Govet's Leap. So he saw the geology, which is just stupendous. Came back to Sydney along Cox's River, where he saw a platypus, but there was no need for him to collect platypus because it was already it was still a disputed organism where it should be put taxonomically, but it was a known organism. So much of what Darwin saw in Australia was known and in existence in European museums. It was like he was a tourist. So he did enjoy it. He wrote about how interesting it was. So people before Darwin had invented the category of marsupial, so that wasn't a problem. But to see where they might be in the actual hierarchy of animals is problematic. Everyone who had said anything about marsupials realized that they were primitive, that they were early. So nobody said that they were very advanced that had then kind of deteriorated. But it's Darwin who gave us a framework to really think about where marsupials were and are in the place of things, in the scheme of things. The other thing that Darwin did when he was in Sydney was that he paid a visit to an artist, Conrad Martens, one of the famous early artists in Australia. And Martens too had been on the Beagle voyage for a short time and had done some astonishing watercolours of their times in South America, the rough southern areas of South America, some very striking watercolours. And at that point in Sydney, Darwin he commissioned 2 pictures from Martens, probably which already existed in sketch form, because Darwin paid for them and took them away with him when he left for Tasmania. So those are still in the Darwin collections. They're very striking images. One is of the Beagle, the ship, in the narrows of Tierra del Fuego, where they were resettling where they were settling the mission station. Bit of natural selection down here. It's a pity they haven't given them mice or something. This. That's an insect, so it's less bothersome. Butterflies played a big part in Wallace's life because he used them, or they showed him how there was adaptive radiation. So a little island could have its own particular form of butterfly that was then not quite replicated on another island, just a river's breadth away. It's really important for Wallace. Darwin had the same kind of sense of geographical diversification, but for him it was more birds. And we have the story of the finches, we have the story of the mockingbirds, we have the story of the rhea in South America, all of which were birds that occupied a specific geographical area. So for Darwin and for Wallace, they both recognized, they were the first to recognize that some species are specific to some areas, but then there's very closely related species in a very closely geographically oriented area. So they were founders of what we now call biogeography. And for them, it gave them a real biological source of inquiry to think about how could that happen. And it's there that many people, including myself, think that the origins of thinking about evolutionary change emerge from considering that problem of diversification.